Hello and welcome to today's session on International Financial Management. I am Dr. Maruf Ahmed Mir, PhD in Financial Markets and MBA in Finance and Accounts from AMU Aligarh. And at present, I am associated with the Asian Business School, Noida, as Associate Professor in the area of Finance and Accounts. So, dear students, continuing with the evolution of the international monetary system, let's discuss today the Bretton Woods system, which was from 1945 to 1973. The depression of 1930s, followed by another war, had vastly diminished the commercial trade, the international exchange of the currencies, and cross-border lending and borrowing. What was left was only memories of what the system had once been. Revival of the system was necessary, and the construction of the post-war financial system began with the Bretton Woods Agreement that emerged from the International Monetary and Financial Conference of the United and the Association Nations in July 1944 at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There was a general agreement that restoring the gold standards was out of question, that exchange rates should basically be stable, that government needed access to credits in convertible currencies if they were to stabilize exchange rates, and that the government should make major adjustments in exchange rate only after consultation with other countries. On specifics, however, opinion was divided. The British wanted a reduced role for gold, more exchange rate flexibility than had existed with the gold standard, a large pool of lendable resources at the disposal of a proposed international monetary organization, and acceptance of the principle that the burden of the correcting payment disequilibria should be shared by both surplus countries and the deficit countries. The Americans favored a major role for gold, highly stable exchange rates, a small pool of lendable resources, and a principle that the burden of the adjustment of the payment imbalances should fall primarily on the deficit countries. The negotiations at Bretton Woods made certain recommendations in 1944. Each nation should be at liberty to use macroeconomic policies for full employment. This tenet ruled out a return to gold standard. Free floating exchange rate could not work. Their ineffectiveness had been demonstrated during the 1920s and 1930s. But the extremes of both permanently fixed and the free floating rates should be avoided. A monetary system was needed that could recognize that exchange rates were both a national and an international concern. The agreement established a dollar-based international monetary system and created two new institutions, the International Monetary Fund, called as IMF, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, called as World Bank. The basic role of IMF would be to help countries with balance of payment and exchange rate problems, while the World Bank would help countries with post-war reconstruction and general economic development. The basic purpose of this new monetary system was to facilitate the expansion of world trade and to use the US dollar as a standard of value. The Bretton Woods Agreement produced three propositions. Number one, the stable exchange rate under the gold standard before World War I were desirable but there were certain conditions to make adjustments in exchange rate necessary. Number 2, performance of fluctuating exchange rates had been unsatisfactory. And number 3, the complex network of government controls during 1931-1945 deterred the expansion of world trade and investment. However, there were certain conditions which required government control over international trade and payments. The keystones of the system were: number 1, no provision was made for the United States to change the value of gold at $35 per ounce. And number 2, each country was obligated to define its monetary unit in terms of gold or dollars. While other currencies were required to exchange their currencies for gold, US dollar remained convertible into gold at $35 per ounce. Thus, each country established par rates of exchange between its currency and the currencies of all other countries. Each currency was permitted to fluctuate within plus or minus 1% of the par value by buying or selling foreign exchange and gold as needed. However, if a currency became too weak to maintain its par value, it was allowed to devaluate up to 10% without formal approval by the International Monetary Fund. Thus, the main points of the post-war system evolved from Bretton Woods Conference were as follows. Number 1, a new institution, the International Monetary Fund (IMF), would be established in Washington, D.C. Its purpose would be to lend foreign exchange to any member whose supply of foreign exchange had become scarce. This lending would not be automatic but would be conditioned on the members' pursuit of economic policies consistent with the other points of the agreement, a determination that would be made by IMF. Number 2, the US dollar and de facto the British pound would be designated as reserve currencies, and other nations would maintain their foreign exchange reserves principally in the form of dollar or pounds. Number 3, each fund member would establish a par value for its currency and maintain the exchange rate for its currency within 1% of par value. In practice, since the principal reserve currency would be the US dollar, this meant that other countries would peg the currencies to the US dollar, and one convertibility was restored, would buy or sell US dollar to keep market exchange within the 1% band around the par value. The United States meanwhile agreed to buy gold from or sell gold to foreign officials, monetary authorities at $35 per ounce settlement of international financial transactions. The US dollar was thus pegged to gold, and any other currency pegged to the dollar was indirectly pegged to gold at a price determined by its par value. Number 4, a fund member could change its par value only with fund approval and only if the country's balance of payment was in fundamental disequilibrium. The meaning of fundamental disequilibrium was left unspecified, but everyone understood that par value changes were not to be used as a matter of course to adjust economic imbalances. Number 5, after a post-war transition period, currencies were to become convertible. That meant to anyone who was not a lawyer that currencies could be freely bought and sold for other foreign currencies. Restrictions were to be removed and hopefully eliminated. So, in order to keep market exchange rates within 1% of the par value, central banks and exchange authorities would have to build up a stock of dollar reserved with which to intervene in the foreign exchange market. Number 6, the fund would get gold and currencies to lend through subscription. That is, countries would have to make a payment subscription of gold and currency to the IMF in order to become a member. Subscription quotas were assigned according to member size and resources. Payment of quota normally was 25% in gold and 75% in the member's own currency. Those with bigger quotas had to pay more but also got more voting rights regarding fund decisions. Students, now we will discuss the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system. The Bretton Woods system worked without major changes from 1947 till 1971. During this period, the fixed exchange rates were maintained by officials' intervention in the foreign exchange markets. International trade expanded in real terms at a faster rate than world output, and currencies of many nations, particularly those of developed countries, became convertible. The stability of exchange rate removed a great deal of uncertainty from international trade and business transactions, thus helping the countries to grow. Also, the working of this system imposed a degree of discipline on the economic and financial policies of the participating nations. During the 1950s and 1960s, the IMF also expanded and improved its operations to preserve the Bretton Woods system. The system, however, suffered from a number of inherent structural problems. In the first place, there was much imbalance in the roles and responsibilities of the surplus and the deficit nations. Countries with persistent deficits in their balance of payment had to undergo tight and stringent economic policy measures if they wanted to make help from IMF and stop the drain in their reserves. However, countries with surplus position in their balance of payment were not bound by such immediate compulsions. Although sustained increase in their international resources mean that they might have to put up with some inflationary consequences, these options were much more reasonable than those for the deficit nations. The basic problem here was the rigid approach adopted by IMF to the balance of payment disequilibria situations. The controversy mainly centered around the conditionality issue, which referred to a set of rules and policies that a member country is required to pursue as a prerequisite to using the IMF resources. These policies mainly try and ensure that the use of the resources by concerned member is appropriate and temporary. The IMF distinguishes between two levels of conditionality: low conditionality, where a member needs funds only for a short period, and a high conditionality, where the member country wants a large access to the funds resources. This involves formulation of a formal financial program containing specific measures designed to eliminate the country's balance of payment disequilibrium. Use of IMF resources under these circumstances requires IMF willingness that the stabilization program is adequate for the achievement of the objectives and an understanding by a member to implement it. Now we will discuss the fourth regime called as the Flexible Exchange Rate Regime 1973 till present. The turmoil in exchange markets did not cease when major currencies were allowed to float since the beginning of March 1973. Since 1973, most industrial countries and many developing countries allowed their currencies to float with government intervention whenever necessary in the foreign exchange market. We will now, students, discuss the alternative exchange rate systems which followed. Number one was called the crawling peg, which is also called sliding or gliding parity. A cross between fixed rate system and a fully flexible system are the semi-fixed systems such as the crawling peg and the wide band. They differ from fixed rate system because of their greater flexibility in terms of exchange rate movements. But they are not a floating system either, because there is still a limit with regard to how far the exchange rate can move. Because the infrequent adjustments of the IMF's par value system necessitated a large devaluation at a large rate, the crawling peg rate was developed. The idea was to adjust the rate slowly but small amount at any point of time in the continuous basis to correct for any overvaluation and undervaluation. The continuous but small adjustment mechanism, for example, a little as 0.5% a month or 6% for a whole year. This was designed to discourage speculation by setting an upper limit that speculators could gain from devaluating in 1 year. The disadvantage of this system is that it requires countries to have ample reserves for the prolonged process of adjustment. Also, the minor adjustments may not correct the currency's overvaluation or undervaluation. Number two, wide band. The purpose of wideband is to compensate for the rigidity of the fixed rate system. Similarly to and yet different from the adjustable peg system, the wideband allows the currency value to fluctuate by say 5% on each side of the par. Not primarily dedicated to exchange rate changes, this system uses the more flexible movement to warn speculators of the more adverse consequences when their guess about the direction of the exchange rate proves to be wrong. Under the wideband scheme, a country pursuing more inflationary policies will find the prices of its international goods going up, necessitating a depreciation program to correct the country's balance of payment in order to slow growth and curb inflation, while eventually risk recession. The country's exchange rate would then sink towards the floor under its par value. Once the fixed limit is reached, that is, after hitting either the floor or the ceiling, the country is back to the rigidity of the fixed rate all over again. Moreover, if a wide band is desirable because of the increase in flexibility, a country may be better off with no limit for movement at all. Number 3 system was flexible or floating system. Under the fixed system, excessive demands for gold developed and the United States was forced to support the sale of gold in 1968, except to the official parties. But taking this action did not help, and by late 1960s, the dollar came under increasing pressure because of the prolonged and steep deterioration of the balance of payments. A crisis of confidence developed and foreigners' reluctance to hold dollar resulted in a change in the dollar's historic value. On August 15, 1971, the United States suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold and other reserve assets altogether, and it floated the dollar to force a change in the parity as well as the review of the IMF. The subsequent Smithsonian Agreement resulted in a revaluation of other currencies and the devaluation of the dollar by 10.35%. In Feb 1973 followed a great deal of speculation against the dollar. The crisis renewed and the second 10% devaluation followed. The crisis forced the official foreign exchange markets to close in Europe and Japan for about 2.5 weeks. When these markets reopened, all major currencies were allowed to float. After an initial period of remarkable stability, the dollar sank rapidly for 7 weeks because of balance of payment deficits, Watergate revelations, renewed inflation in the United States, and a tightening of the money abroad. Had the fixed system been in effect, the traditional crisis would have resulted. Foreign exchange markets would have been closed and large-scale adjustments of parties would have been necessary. With the dollar free to float, however, the beneficial effect was that speculative pressures were reflected in a sharp drop in the exchange value of the dollar without a closing of the market. The resultant devaluation in turn helped the United States to improve its trade performance. In October 1978, another crisis came along for the US dollar. Concerns over inflation in the United States prompted a panic selling of the dollar and the stock market plunged. In spite of the risk of recession, the Carter administration was forced to take drastic measures because of several reasons. Number 1, the dollar decline reduced American consumers' purchasing power. Number 2, soaring prices hurt the anti-inflation program. OPEC members declined value of their dollar reserves, encouraged them to boost oil prices. And number 4, stock value lost more than $110 billion, resulting in a large-scale retrenchment of business investment plans. Among the measures taken were the increase in the Federal Reserve's discount rate, gold scale, and dollar buying. Initially, the magnitude of the action took a market by surprise. Gold prices dropped and the bond prices, stock market and the dollar all rose significantly. Yet, by the end of the month, the strong anti-inflation policies themselves weakened the confidence in the government and chaos ensued. Additional panic selling drove the dollar to record lows. Once again, by allowing the dollar to float, the traditional adverse consequences of the market closing and the official devaluation were averted. Under a flexible or a floating system, the market force based in demand and supply determines a currency's value. A surplus in a country results in an appreciation of its currency. Immediate higher prices mass reserve and opportunity costs. In addition, too much money on reserve leads to loss of investment opportunities. On the other hand, a country's deficit will lower its currency value, making it easier to export more later. Now, let's discuss briefly the classification of currency arrangements, and we will discuss present day currency regime as per IMF. Number 1, more flexible exchange rate systems. Countries such as Japan and United States are in a more flexible exchange rate system in which currency values are allowed to float in relation to each other. So, government intervention has a significant impact on currency values, especially in the short term. Thus, these currencies are not in truly floating rate system. Though managed floating exchange rate systems have no official bound on currency values, government do intervene in this system in order to accomplish their policy objectives. So, managed floating systems allow governments to implement their policy objectives within a relatively flexible exchange rate system and to coordinate monetary policies with another government if they choose. Number 2 system is called pegged exchange rate system. In this system, currency values are fixed in relation to another currency such as the US dollar, euro, or to a currency basket such as the special drawing rights called as SDR. SDR are an international reserve created by the IMF and are allocated to member countries to supplement foreign exchange reserves. The basic disadvantage of a pegged system is that central banks must fight the market to maintain the system even if the inflation rate in two countries are the same. There is still a probability that currencies will undergo significant change in market value and fall out of a pegged exchange rate system. Number 3rd system is limited flexibility exchange rate systems. The limited flexibility category consists of two groups. The first group includes several Gulf countries with currencies that have shown limited flexibility in terms of US dollar. The government of these oil producing countries have been able to maintain limited flexibility against the dollar because their major export is oil and oil is priced around the world in US dollar. The second group is comprised of countries in the European Exchange Rate Mechanism (ERM). During 1998, the ERM was a cooperative arrangement in which currency values were managed around a controlled rate called as European Currency Unit, or in short ECU, a basket of currencies weighted by each member's proportion of intra-European trade and gross national product. The limited flexibility exchange rate system attempted to combine the best of the fixed, that is pegged period, and a floating, more flexible system. First, the short-term currency risk was reduced because foreign exchange rates tended to remain relatively stable within the ERM. Second, as the ERM has allowed bands for movement around the Central European rates, the system did not need highly restrictive monetary policies that accompany a fixed exchange rate system. If for some reason a currency would fall below its ERM floor, European central banks would cooperate in buying the currency in an attempt to keep it within the ERM band. Students, that is all for today. Hope you have understood. So, we will meet in the next episode with a new topic. Till then, take care and